Imagine living on an island so remote, battered by the North Sea on one side and the Atlantic on the other, that winter storms could cut you off for weeks. The nearest help isn't down the road, it's hundreds of miles away, across waters that kill. This was life on Shetland in the early 20th century, isolated, exposed, and entirely dependent on what the island and its people could provide. Yet somehow, the poorest families were fed, the lost were returned, someone or something was watching over the Isles. Whether that something was real, that's where it gets interesting. Welcome back to Golden Cattle Media. Somewhere off the coast of Scotland, there's a flat rock above the waterline where a creature with the head of a wolf used to sit and fish. He left food on the doorsteps of families who were struggling. He guided lost travelers home through the fog. He asked for nothing in return. In a folklore tradition absolutely packed with things that want to drown you, he is the only one that is on your side. The question is not what he was, it's where he came from. Even today, getting to Shetland is a journey. No, really. When I was researching the subject, I wanted to go to Shetland to get footage, but the ferry trip is 12 hours long one way and about £300 at cost. That's as long as it takes me for a one-way trip to the US on a plane. The island sits right at the top of Scotland, closer to Norway than it is to London, surrounded on all sides by the North Sea, the Norwegian Sea, and the Atlantic. In 1901, it may as well have been the moon. That is the world Inga Tolik was living in. Her husband had gone on a herring boat in October. He had not come back yet. That was not unusual. Fishing trips could stretch out for weeks, especially when the North Sea decided to be difficult. She had managed before. But this winter was different. The money had run out faster than expected. Food was nearly gone. She had 3 young children to feed, the youngest not even walking yet, and there was nobody she could really ask for help because everyone around her was in the same position. There was no running to the mainland. No food bank, no aid, no corner shop she could get to. Just her, the island, and the water pressing in from every side. She was awake before the sun one morning, which was just her life now, when she opened the door to check the weather. There were fish on the steps, 6 of them. Not the scrappy cuts people throw away, big, proper fish, enough to feed her family for days. She looked out across the bay, no boats, no footprints. The frost on the ground had not even been touched. At the edge of the water, right where the land started to slope down toward the sea, there was a shape, large, already still, watching her. The light shifted, and it was gone. She picked up the fish and went back inside. She did not ask questions out loud because she did not need to. She'd lived on this island her whole life. She already knew. The Shetlanders had a name for it. They called him the Wulver. The name comes from the old Scots word for wolf, wolf, which had been passed down by generations of Norse and Scots before landing in Shetland's mouth. By the time people were saying it regularly, it had softened into something that sounds less like a warning and more like a nickname. That fits, actually. The Wulver was not what you would expect. He was large, heavily built, covered in hair, with the head of a wolf sitting on a man's body. But he wasn't cursed. He was not a man who turned into a wolf under a full moon. He was not a wolf pretending to be a man. He was just himself, a stable, consistent presence on the edges of the community, and the community had quietly agreed to just let him be. He had a flat rock above the tide line where he liked to fish. The locals called it Wulver's Stain. He returned to it so consistently that it became as much his as the rock itself. If you let him alone, he left you alone. But if your family was going hungry, fish would turn up on your doorstep. No note, no request, no expectation of anything back. Just the fish and the quiet understanding between both parties that nobody needed to make a big thing of it. Despite how TikTok and the news may portray it, I've come to find that Scotland is the kind of place where if you need help, you will get it. People are kind. Not always nice, but kind and willing to help if asked. Or in some cases, if they see you struggling, they will offer assistance. That's something that never really changed. He would also guide the lost. Shetland fog comes off in the Atlantic fast, and the moorland at night is not somewhere you want to be confused. If you are out there and you cannot find your way back, a large figure might appear ahead of you, moving steadily. If you followed it, it would take you somewhere you recognized. The lights of a croft, the sound of the sea at a familiar point, and then it would vanish. No ceremony, no thank you needed. Now, most Scottish folklore is brutal. Genuinely brutal. The Selkie will leave you, the Kelpie will drown you, the bull men of Minch will sink your boat while singing about it. The creature that comes out of the water on the moorland and the dark in this part of the world are almost always warnings dressed up as stories. Don't go near the water alone, don't trust beautiful strangers, don't stray too far from what you know. The Wulver fits none of that. He is the only creature in Shetland's entire folklore tradition that is, without any conditions, on your side. Which raises the questions, why had nobody heard of him before 1932? Here's where it gets interesting. Everything we know about the Wulver comes from one book, Shetland Traditional Lore, written by a woman named Jessie Margaret Edmonston Saxby, published in 1932. Saxby was a serious, genuine collector of Shetland folklore. Her book includes trolls, giants, witches, selkies, all of it documented with care. The Wulver sits there alongside all those, written in the same voice, treated as part of the same tradition. The problem is when you go to the Shetland Museum and Archive in Lerwick and ask the archivists about him, they will tell you something that stops you in your tracks. Nobody before Saxby had written about the Wulver. No manuscripts, no letters, no collector's notes from anyone who had visited the island before 1932. Nothing. People have been writing about Shetland for centuries, its Norse roots, its distinct character, its folklore. None of them mentioned anything like him. The leading theory is that Saxby invented him, or to be a bit more generous, that she was inspired by the landscape itself. Shetland's place names carry a lot of Old Norse in them because Norse settlers arrived on the island in the 9th century, and many of the names they gave things had survived in various forms. 2 locations in Shetland have been recorded with the names of Wulver and Wulver. On the surface, those look like they might contain the Norse word for wolf, but the archivists believe it's more likely to come from the Old Norse word Alf, meaning fairy or spirit, which would make Wulver's hole not Wolf's Hollow, but the fairy now. A completely different thing. The idea is that Saxby saw those place names, made a connection that was probably not there, and built a creature around it. Now, there have been medicinal theories too, because of course there always are. A researcher named Susan School Eberle suggested that the Wulver could be a folk memory of people with Hunter syndrome, a genetic condition that can cause a prominent brow, a flat nasal bridge, enlarged hands, and a rough voice. Or possibly even lycanthropy, which is a documented psychological condition where a person genuinely believes they are turning into an animal. They see claws and fur in the mirror, they make sounds that are not quite human. Those theories have not really landed, and honestly I think it's because they are solving for the wrong creature. The Wulver is not frightening, he is not feral, he sits on a rock and fishes. Hunter syndrome does not explain a creature that notices when your family is hungry and quietly does something about it. My own theory, and I want to be upfront that this is mine and not from any research I came across, is hypertrichosis. Hypertrichosis is a condition that causes excessive hair growth across the face and body, not just a beard. Full coverage, the kind that in a small island community with no medical knowledge of it would read as something between human and animal. The most well-documented example from a similar time period is the man named Fyodor Yevstchev, known in the local circus world as Jojo the Dog Boy. He was born in Russia in the 1860s, he had hypertrichosis, so did his father. In 1884, he was brought to America to perform for P.T. Barnum. Now picture someone with that condition living alone on the Shetland moorland. Fishing every day, knowing the land and the tides better than anyone because he had spent his whole life on the outside edges of the community. Over time, he may have become exactly the kind of figure Inga saw at the edge of the bay. Something large, standing upright. Someone who could have been part of the community without judgment, but wanted the safety of isolation. This is speculation. I want to be very clear about that. What we are left with is this. The most honest reading of the evidence is that Jesse Saxby either invented the Wulver completely or assembled him from fragments of place names and local feeling that had no creature attached to them yet. He's probably not as old as Kelpies or Selkies, but I do not think that is the most interesting question here. Think about what Saxby would have known when she sat down to write that book. She knew the Nuka-Leve, a skinless horse demon that crawls out of the sea and brings plague and famine with it. She knew the Trow, mischievous at best and genuinely dangerous at worst. She knew the Finfolk and the Blue Men and all the rest of it. She had spent her entire life collecting these stories. She knew exactly what she had. And she still wrote the Wulver. A creature that fishes quietly, minds its own business, and makes sure the struggling family down the hill gets through the winter. A creature that asks for nothing. That guides you home in the dark and disappears before you can even say thank you. Whether she invented him or not, she chose him. She put him in the same book as centuries of tradition and treated him with the same care. So does knowing the probable origin make him less real? I don't think so. And here's why. Every piece of folklore exists because someone needed it to. The Kelpie exists because rivers and lochs of the Scottish Highlands could kill you and children needed to be warned away from water. The Selkie exists because people needed a way to talk about longing and loss and the feeling that someone you love has a life you cannot follow them into. Scotland is still dangerous. The lochs are still ice cold even in the height of summer. The mountains are still vast. And every time my husband and I drive through Glencoe or visit Loch Lomond, which we do with abnormal frequency, we see search and rescue looking for lost or injured hikers or someone who has fallen into the loch. But even still, with the danger nearby, it's home. At the end of big parties, weddings, engagements, and even big birthday bashes, the folk song Loch Lomond is played. The Runrig version, obviously. And the people being celebrated are surrounded by those there to celebrate them in a circle, sing along as loudly as they can, and at one point, they sing about being home again. In some small way, I think that's part of what makes the Wulver so special. The Wulver, if Saxby made him, exists because of a tradition full of warnings was missing something. Something that watched out for you, something that showed up when things were hardest and did not ask for anything back. It's a strange sense of home and community that is so often missing in folklore. And that is not a small thing to put into the world. He's not going away. Not in the way the Trow or the Celtic is still around with centuries of oral tradition behind them, but in a different way. In the last 20 years, the Wulver has become an internet creature. He shows up on folklore forums and creature lists and YouTube videos, usually presented as ancient Scottish tradition, sitting alongside the Nuka-Leve and the Kelpie as if he'd been here just as long. He hasn't, and that kind of matters a little bit. When the record gets muddy, when the invented lore travels with documented fact, the communities whose real traditions are being talked about lose something. Shetland has a specific, old, genuinely remarkable folklore tradition. It deserves to be known accurately. A single creature that appears once in a single 1932 book is not the same as the one that appears in Norse sagas, and treating them the same is a kind of flattening that does not serve anyone. But here's what the debunking tends to miss. People keep telling him. Not because he's ancient, not because there's a manuscript trail somewhere, because he fishes quietly and minds his own business and leaves food on the doorsteps of people who need it, and then disappears before anyone has to feel awkward about it. Somewhere in Shetland, there's still a flat rock called Wolverstone. The creature who supposedly fished there might have been one woman's invention, built from a misread place in a name field survey. And yet the rock has a name, and the name is kept. If Jessie Saxby gave Shetland something it needed, something kind in a tradition that had earned its grimness, honestly, does it really matter if she made him up? Or is that just how it's always supposed to work? I would love to know what you think. If a creature you'd grown up hearing about had turned out to have been invented by one person less than 100 years ago, would that change anything for you? And if you're from Shetland, or if you spent time there, I genuinely want to know whether you've heard the Wulver being talked about locally, or whether he really is mostly an internet creature now. If you enjoyed this journey into the folklore of Shetland, please like the video. It really does help the channel more than you might think. And if you want more stories like this from the strange edges of Celtic tradition and the folklore that history almost forgot, subscribe. We'll be here somewhere between myth and memory. And as always, history remembers, but folklore never forgets.